So what are the causes of phobias and post-traumatic stress disorder? Well, a phobia is an irrational response to something. So it's having a fear response when there isn't really a threat. So for some things there's a bit of a crossover. It is natural, for example, if you see a big scary spider that could bite you, hurt you in some way, it's natural to feel fear. But if you see a money spider or a really small little spider and you feel fear, that's then an irrational response. So a phobia is having an irrational response to something. So it could be an irrational response to heights, an irrational response to the thought of being sick, an irrational negative kind of fear response to spiders that aren't really scary spiders. So that's what a phobia is. Post-traumatic stress disorder works in the brain in the same way, but people wouldn't necessarily describe it as irrational. What it is that something happened that caused that trauma so that it protects you from having that happen again. So really, a phobia has hijacked the post-traumatic stress disorder pattern. So the idea is something took place, it was something where you felt at risk, so it was perhaps something very scary, and you've then learnt that pattern, that there's something dangerous about that, and you've got to try and avoid that in the future. So your brain gives you feelings of fear, and if it's really severe, as it can be, for example, with post-traumatic stress disorder especially, you may get flashbacks, you may find that plays on your mind all the time, and you may end up having lots of other conditions attached with it. So you might experience generalized anxiety, you might experience depression, you might end up having addictions. All sorts of things can spiral as a way of trying to cope with and minimize the trauma. Phobias and post-traumatic stress disorder work through a process called pattern matching. So what pattern matching is it's that your brain tries to match one pattern with another. So for example, we'll take a simple phobia. If a spider, when you're say 6 years old, a spider crawls into your bed and you wake up feeling something on your face. And when you wake up, you see this enormous spider on your face, you scream, you brush the spider off, you may not have come to any harm, but you felt extreme fear in that moment. So it's created a pattern saying, this spider could have hurt me, caused me extreme fear. So spider, the pattern is the spider, any representation of that spider causes the fear, so that in the future, if you see or sense any representation of that spider, you feel the fear again. So there's a pattern match there. There's a pattern that was laid down, and anything in the future that matches to that pattern. So it doesn't have to be a real spider. So pattern matching in this sense works in a kind of sloppy fashion. It isn't 100% accurate. So there's a good reason for this. From a survival point of view, if the pattern had to be totally accurate for that to work, then if that same giant spider came up to you in a different context, you wouldn't be scared of it. And let's assume that giant spider could be poisonous and could cause you serious harm. If you totally ignore it, because you're sat at the dinner table and the spider's walking along and you don't see it as a threat, then it could walk up to you, it could get on your hand, bite you and kill you. Whereas if the pattern's nice and general, rather than it being that if the spider gets on your face again it scares you, but if it is in any other context it doesn't scare you. If the pattern's general and it's very sloppy, then if you see movement that looks like it could be that spider, it's better to err on the side of caution and be safe than to ignore it and be dead. So if you saw something that looked like legs, spider's legs, that reminded you of that spider. You don't even have to consciously be aware that it's reminded you of that spider, but you could just see something like pipe cleaners or something, and that could then make you jump and feel all panicky because it's pattern matched. It's taken something that resembled the spider and made you think about it on a non-conscious level, so it doesn't have to be conscious, but on a non-conscious level it's made you aware of that pattern, aware of the idea of the spider. This makes sense from an evolutionary point of view because humans who didn't have this sloppy pattern matching would die. You know, if you heard a rustling bush and when you approached that bush a big lion jumped out on you and you escaped the lion, if you weren't traumatized by that experience and then the next time you heard a rustling bush you thought, oh, this is a different bush, it'll be fine, you may die because there could be another lion in that bush. So hearing a rustling bush would trigger the fear even if that rustling bush is actually just a little rabbit in the bush. So that's the idea of how phobias and post-traumatic stress disorder cause so many problems, because it's very sloppy pattern matching. So moving over to post-traumatic stress disorder, it could be that you were traumatized by being mugged by someone wearing black, and your brain wants to just save you, keep you safe. So anytime you see someone in black, that could trigger the fear, that could trigger that post-traumatic memory and make you have flashbacks. It could be that the perpetrator grabbed hold of you, and so then when someone else anywhere in your life in the future, even 20, 30, 40 years later, grabs hold of you in the similar kind of way, that part of the experience is pattern matched loosely. So someone grabbing hold of you say, oh, wait a minute, and they grab your arm from behind, for example. Suddenly, your arm's just been grabbed, you suddenly get this surge of fear, and maybe you become aggressive because of it to try and escape the person who's grabbed you, even though it's totally innocent. They're just trying to get your attention. They don't realise they are falling into a pattern match. And I've had a similar thing doing hypnotherapy, where a client came in just wanting to have some quite basic work around learning some relaxation techniques. She said, I can't really relax, I'm not very good at relaxing, just like to learn to be able to relax. I had asked a number of questions about this, had no reason to explore her entire life history or anything like that. And I said to her, okay, just close your eyes and take a moment to begin to relax. That's it, just relax. And I said that while I watched her breathing out. So that's it, just relax. But the way I said, that's it, just relax, matched the way someone years and years earlier had said that while they were raping her. So she was aware of that experience that she had had. She was aware that it's been having an impact on her relationships and things like that. But no one, because she hadn't encountered a hypnotist before or anything like that, no one had said, that's it, just relax. No one had said that specific type of phrase in that specific type of voice since that experience many years earlier. So she had no reason to think that, you know, she wasn't going to warn me and say, oh, by the way, don't say relax to me because it will make me get really anxious or anything like that. She had no reason to suspect it. I obviously had no reason to suspect it. But just me saying that made her suddenly freak out, suddenly get really scared. She suddenly opened her eyes and was all panicking, and obviously I dealt with that perfectly fine and we addressed the issues and I helped her around the trauma. But it just goes to show that something that is seemingly innocent in one context could have been linked back. So someone could become agitated in a context where others are looking, thinking, I don't understand why this person's getting anxious about this, it doesn't make sense. So it's because of that kind of sloppy pattern matching. And in the case of phobias, it's technically faulty pattern matching because it's saying that something's scary that isn't actually scary. So it may have been at one time. So if someone's got post-traumatic stress disorder from being ran over, from being mugged, from being in a war zone and witnessing horrific things in a war zone, it's perfectly reasonable to have trauma because of that. It's perfectly reasonable that's not faulty. Being scared of those types of situations is healthy. Trying to avoid a war zone, trying to avoid being mugged, trying to avoid all those kind of things, that is a healthy thing. But trying to avoid everyday spiders, trying to avoid heights, which if someone's got a fear of heights, it doesn't necessarily even have to be that high. I know people who can't stand on a chair because that's too high. So having that kind of thing, that's then faulty, that's over the top. And so what you use the rewind technique for and what you treat the phobia for isn't necessarily to make someone start prodding spiders or anything like that. It's not to make someone 100% comfortable with, say, spiders. It's to make it so that it's realistic and so that it's contextualized. So if you see a spider that looks dangerous, avoid the spider that looks dangerous. But if you're aware that the spider is safe, then you don't have to respond to it as if it's a threat.